Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 horrifying facts that you really didn't want to know. While we aren't out to paint the world as a picture of horrors, there are many things going on that you may not have wanted to know. From the disgusting to the horrifying to the scary, sometimes people think they would be better off not knowing certain things. However, to be forewarned is to be forearmed, so it's important to know about even the most horrifying of facts. These facts will surprise you, and some will make you think twice about the world around you. Number 10. There are many lead hotspots much worse than Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan has been all over the news for a long time now. The city is now a national name, and it has become a well-known story of how poor management on many different levels led to horribly high levels of lead in the drinking supply of an already poor and struggling city. Even today, the city's water supply is still not cleaned up, even if many people have already moved on and stopped caring about it. However, what people don't really realize is that Flint is only the tip of the iceberg. In a study, Reuters identified 3,000 lead hotspots around the United States that were actually worse than Flint. These cities don't just have problems with the water, but also have problems with the infrastructure that was built using lead paint. These structures then fall apart, and young children inhale bits of paint while playing, and they end up with irreparable damage to their developing bodies. Overall, the amount of cities that are still dealing with horrible lead issues from multiple sources is huge, and the problem is mostly being ignored at a national level. Number 9. There are more slaves right now than ever in recorded history. Many people believe that slavery is on the downslope. After all, most countries have outlawed it, and that makes it a lot more difficult to keep around. However, some estimates still suggest that there are around 27 million people today in some form of slavery. This is easily the largest amount in recorded history, and more than double the amount taken during the transatlantic slave trade. Slavery takes forms that aren't as obvious as they might have been in ancient history. People will end up working as slaves under debt or other more subtle reasons, but it still is slavery. In many countries, child labor is incredibly common, and the children are paid next to nothing at all. However, for those who believe that slavery is mostly gone, well, there is some hope. Some analysts believe that with countries outlawing it and getting better at enforcing it, there is hope that it will be mostly gone within 30 years. Of course, you will never stop human nature, but the better we get at detecting it, stopping it, and helping the victims, the more we can free the world of slavery. Number 8. Rattlesnakes are evolving to hide their rattle sounds. Rattlesnakes are a well-known fear for people traveling through various parts of the world. The telltale rattling sound is a reminder that something very dangerous is nearby, and you should watch your step very carefully. They have become well known for their rattle and have been featured in all sorts of popular media. In all those situations where they have been used in movies or television, nobody ever stopped to ask what was scarier than a rattlesnake. And, well, the answer would be a rattlesnake that doesn't rattle. This may sound like the stuff of science fiction or some kind of bad movie, but it is quickly becoming a reality. Rattlesnakes are starting to evolve to no longer rattle at all. While some think it is a more direct genetic mutation in order to increase survival, even those who think somewhat otherwise still basically believe that it comes down to Darwinian survival mechanisms being at play. Some rattlesnakes had a mutation where their rattle didn't work right, and those without the rattles seemed to survive longer, which led to more of those rattlesnakes reproducing. If this continues, the rattlesnake could evolve to no longer rattle at all over time. At first it developed in order to ward off predators, but now it is actually helping predators find it and possibly warning away potential prey. It may no longer be a useful feature for the rattlesnake, so it's being discarded. Number 7. In some parts of the American Southwest, you can witness swarms of mating tarantulas. Tarantulas are one of the most freakiest animals imaginable. They look like a hideous cross between a small animal and a large insect. It is for this reason that a few odd people like to keep them as pets, much to the chagrin of everyone around them. Tarantulas are hairy and have way too many legs and generally just freak out just about anyone who comes near one. In popular culture, despite being generally harmless, tarantulas are often described as being more poisonous than they actually are, and people go totally ballistic when they see one. Still, even knowing that they are not poisonous, seeing a tarantula outside of a glass enclosure would be quite enough to get most of us running away. If you really like tarantulas, though, you can visit the American Southwest during the tarantula mating season. And if you really don't like tarantulas, you should really stay away from the American Southwest during tarantula mating season. During that time of year, hundreds of tarantulas will be seen swarming all over the place, and plenty end up inside people's houses. Normally, tarantulas are very reclusive, but will gladly come out when it's time to mate and ensure propagation of their hairy, too many-legged species. Also, when their eggs hatch, they hatch in the hundreds. Number 6. The mercury levels in tuna are far more dangerous than many people realize. Many people eat tuna on a regular basis, sometimes even every day, and they probably shouldn't, especially if they are pregnant. Many people have heard more recently about the dangerous levels of mercury in tuna. Some people think it's only low-grade tuna, and others probably think that the whole thing is kind of overblown in general. However, the truth is that tuna is actually a lot more harmful than many people realize. Tuna is one of the larger fish, so it eats a lot of smaller fish and ends up with very high mercury levels. This is also the type of mercury that takes the longest to leave your body. Some have reported eating a lot of tuna while pregnant and then having a child with birth defects, as well as other issues, including mental retardation. The sad truth is that many people are just simply unaware of how harmful tuna can be for pregnant women and even for healthy people. It is not recommended to eat tuna more than a couple of times a week. While it is hard to prove that the tuna in mercury is truly responsible for a lot of these birth defect cases, it is definitely quite possible. In fact, a lot of people who think mercury from a vaccine caused autism may be confusing it with mercury from the fish they were eating. The mercury from a vaccine is in a tiny amount and is a type that quickly leaves the body, while the amounts in fish like tuna are much higher and linger much, much longer. Number 5. The Doomsday clock has been getting closer to midnight since 1991. For many years, atomic scientists have been keeping an eye on something they call the Doomsday clock. It is a measurement they use for how close the world is to possible nuclear war and/or annihilation. Right now, the clock is only 2.5 minutes away from midnight essentially being the end of the world. And the worst part is that the clock has been steadily getting closer for some time now. While the clock went down a tad bit in the very early 90s and went down 1 minute in 2010, it has been rising pretty steadily for the past few decades. The clock measures many different factors, including the issues posed by climate change, nuclear weapons, the energy crisis, and global overpopulation. They are worried that world leaders are not doing enough work together to address all of these huge global issues, and they believe that we are in dire straits. The clock is currently half a minute away, with the closest the clock has ever been to complete disaster. Number 4. Despite an increase in no-kill shelters, millions of animals are still put down each year. It has become an increasingly big issue that has got more attention in recent years that the pet population is kind of out of control. Due to what people call puppy mills, we now have tons of cats and dogs being churned out every year to satisfy the consumer's need for fresh puppies and kitties to purchase. But people abandon pets for numerous reasons, and shelters simply cannot handle them all. And these shops keep breeding and selling more animals in order to turn a profit. This has led for animal advocates to call for spaying and neutering your pet in order to prevent the out-of-control pet population from getting worse. Many of these advocates are hoping to get things under control because, almost out of necessity, animals are being put down in huge numbers. There are simply far too many animals that are neglected, and new ones being bred all the time, simply adding to this number. This has led to a no-kill shelter movement, where shelters promise they will find homes for animals instead of killing them. Unfortunately, this is simply not always possible, and even those shelters are allowed to kill about 10% of the animals they take in and still keep this designation. This means that even with this budding movement, we are still seeing millions of cats and dogs being put down each year because there are simply way too many pets out there and not enough people that want them. Number 3. Our satellite infrastructure is already dealing with something known as Kessler syndrome. Kessler syndrome was proposed by NASA scientist Donald Kessler decades ago, and is currently something we are already starting to see the effects of, although it's not close to being dangerous yet. Kessler syndrome is a theory that the scientist came up with while studying meteorites, and he also decided he wanted to test his algorithms on satellites. He came up with some alarming results. What he essentially discovered was that if we continued to blanket the space around Earth with satellites, we could eventually end up with collisions that could lead to satellites crashing more and more frequently until we lost all GPS and other such things that we rely on right now. However, for those who are worried, Kessler does not believe we have any immediate concerns. He does not believe the conditions will really start speeding up for another 20 years or more, and he also believes that if we take the time to clean up all the junk satellites in outer space, instead of simply adding more, that we may well be able to get the problem under control before it gets to a point where we cannot stop it. While more than 20 years might seem like quite a way off, if we do not go to the proper trouble to prepare now, then when the time gets closer, it may already be too late. Number 2. The egg industry has been grinding up baby male chicks in grinders for decades. Many of us eat meat, and we accept that there is a certain level of cruelty inherent in any mass-market system for butchering, sterilizing, processing, and packaging meat for millions of people. However, many people believe that if the process can be made more ethical and still remain efficient, then this is definitely something we should be doing. In particular, while most of us accept factory farming as a necessary evil, some people may be a bit shocked when they learn of a big part of the process, and this is what is required for the production of your eggs. See, there are two main different types of chicken breeds used in commercial farming. One is for producing meat, and the other is for laying eggs. For efficiency reasons, you'll never see one being used for the other. When hatching chicks of the egg-laying breed, only the females can actually lay eggs, and the males don't really have much use. This means that the standard practice is to toss the male chicks, while still alive, into a machine that is basically a wood chipper and grinds them up while they are still alive. Even those of us who eat meat probably find this practice pretty barbaric. Grinding up the male chicks is basically just cruel and wasteful. The industry has claimed they are working on a technology which will allow them to solve this problem by knowing which eggs to hatch in the first place. This means they'll know which ones are female to begin with, but they don't expect this technology to be ready until at least 2020. Number 1. Going to space may not actually be such a great idea for most people. Many people find the idea of space travel extremely romantic. It sounds incredibly cool, and almost every sci-fi movie is set in space in some form or another. However, as neat as it sounds, being in space is actually pretty damn awful. Even if you get past all of the issues of having to use vacuum tubes and other gadgets to do every basic task, you would have to deal with the fact that space will quickly eat away at your physical and mental health. You see, the reason that NASA insists that people should be in perfect health is that almost everyone else doesn't stand a chance at all of handling the rigors of space travel. Many astronauts, due to the unique effects on their bodies, come back with permanently decreased eyesight. Sleep deprivation is also common, and the mental and physical stress is incredibly difficult to handle. After prolonged times in space, atrophy of muscles is common. This is another reason why NASA does not want any astronaut to stay in space for too long without taking a break. To make matters worse, astronauts often report seeing flashes of bright light directly in their brains. This is radiation and is possibly doing all kinds of different damage to them that won't be fully understood until years later. Even in low Earth orbit, this can be dangerous. Farther out in space, the effects could be much worse. On top of all of this, scientists have reason to believe that the immune system also doesn't work as well in space, although this could also be due to the exposure to radiation, weakening it. So while space currently seems like something very cool in the movies, for now they really have to leave it to the astronauts. So I really hope you found that video interesting. Please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also over there on the right, a couple of other videos that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.